Hello, my name is Sergio Acedo, and I will be sharing with you my manifesto on Christian leadership based on the writings of Henry Nouwen. A few years ago, I heard a message that blessed my life titled Cancel the Addition, based on Mark chapter 1, verse 11. At the baptism of Jesus, it says, "Then a voice came from heaven, 'You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.'" Before Jesus had ever preached a sermon or done any type of miracle, his Father was pleased in him simply because he was his Son and he was his Father. In the same way, us as sons and daughters of God, we don't have to live a life trying to gain God's approval. He approves of us. He loves us. Nothing will ever change that. Throughout the writings of Nouwen and his sermons, that reaffirmed that message that I am his beloved, that he loves me, I am his son, and he is my father. Nothing will ever change that. And there is no earthly title or leadership position that will give me an identity. My identity is a son of God. In the same way, I believe that God has given me 4 main points, key points, that will allow us to become greater Christian leaders and be successful in the eyes not only of man, but in the eyes of God. The first point is Christian leadership is founded on the spiritual discipline of prayer. Nouwen says to live a life that is not dominated by the desire to be relevant, but is instead safely anchored in the knowledge of God's first love. That is our goal. And prayer does this. It reaffirms that first love on a daily basis throughout the day. We do not get lost in finding our identity in people or in things, but always on that first love with our Father. Now, it connects us to God first, and then prayer connects us to community, which then leads us to the second point. Christian leadership should be focused on ministering in community and not in individual popularity. Prayer then leads us to break the mold of secular leadership, which is focused on the popularity that comes from earthly success. Christian leadership is not focused on the opinions of others, but on the ministry to others as unto the Lord. Now, the messiness of ministry, as Nouwen calls it, can easily drain us and physically and emotionally. There are even moments that people can hurt us and we become discouraged and we feel betrayed. This is where our relationship with God becomes vital in our ministry. We must receive the love and identity from God and from no one else. Then, once we become connected to community, we then need one another, which leads us to the third point. Christian leadership should be founded on confession and forgiveness. Nouwen says that priests and ministers and leaders, that they practice confession is so difficult for them because they are usually receiving confession. And so they fall to the temptation of falling into what he calls spiritualization. We desire to be more spiritual, but our own carnality creates our spiritual world to simply go through the motions of spirituality without truly living them out. For this reason, we need a community in which we can live in transparency of confession and forgiveness. And then once you begin to live in community and begin to live in this transparency and honesty, you then need this last fourth point. Christian leadership should see theological reflection as a priority in ministry. Since ministry becomes, again, as Nouwen calls it, messy, we need to balance the chaos of the spiritual sick in the light of the truth that theology gives us. Now, theological reflection is not only for knowledge, but for spiritual discernment. Discernment is not only when we allow the Holy Spirit to lead us as we minister and work with individuals, but the Holy Spirit also helps us to understand the times so that we may be led by His Spirit and then lead His people. Now, I hope you understood that all 4 points are interconnected. One follows the other. And so prayer begins by identifying ourselves in a relationship with God. then that leads us to our connection with community. We need community. There is no leader without community. And so then, once you live in community, you need to practice confession and forgiveness so that the community remains healthy. Then that allows us to desire a greater discernment so that we're able to lead His people. Now, I pray that the Lord will continue to use you in your Christian leadership as you continue to find your identity as the beloved son and daughter of God, and that He will lead you to be successful, again, not only in the eyes of man, but in His eyes, so that one day we can gain our great eternal reward. May God bless you.